You're dead to me. Those 4 words destroyed my life when my daughter-in-law spat them at me on Thanksgiving Day. For 6 months, I became a ghost, watching from shadows as she struggled to raise 2 young boys alone after my nephew abandoned them. Then the messages started. 500 desperate pleas every single day. Please forgive me. We need you. I was wrong. I read every message but never replied. Not once. Instead, I became her anonymous guardian angel, paying bills, leaving groceries, fixing what was broken. She never knew it was me until that snowy day at the grocery store when a security camera caught my reflection. Now, after 2 years of painful silence and a stroke that stole my voice, I face the hardest decision of my life. Can I forgive the woman who declared me dead? Even as she begs for my return from the grave she dug with her words? Follow this channel for more heart-wrenching true stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family, forgiveness, and the wounds only those we love most deeply can inflict. Like and comment where you're watching from. I read every comment and would love to know which part of this story broke your heart the most. I used to fix broken toys. That's how her children saw me. The grandpa who fixed things. My weathered hands could bring life back to plastic robots and tattered teddy bears that most would have thrown away. Funny how I could mend anything except what mattered most. You're dead to me. Those words still echo in my mind 3 years later. She didn't whisper them. She announced them, standing in her kitchen on Thanksgiving Day, with cranberry sauce still bubbling on the stove and my nephews frozen in shock at the dining table. She spat those words like shards of glass, each syllable designed to cut deep into what was left of my heart. After 47 years of being Uncle Walter, the man who taught her husband to drive, who co-signed their first mortgage, who babysat their kids during every emergency, I became nothing in 5 seconds flat. I remember the sound of that door closing behind me, the dry click of the lock, the absolute silence that followed for 6 months. Then he left. Her husband, my nephew, just disappeared like smoke on a windy day. Left her with 2 young boys, a mountain of mortgage payments, credit card debt that he'd hidden, and nothing but the echo of her own pride to keep her company at night. That's when the messages started. The first one came at 3:17 a.m. Please forgive me. Simple, direct, desperate. Then, I'm so sorry, I was wrong. Then, I need you. We need you. Within a week, it became a flood. Sometimes tender pleas, sometimes angry demands, sometimes just strings of words that made no sense. The digital footprints of someone pacing anxiously in their living room at midnight, phone in hand, pride wrestling with necessity. 6 months, over 500 messages a day, text messages, voicemails, emails, notes slipped under my door, letters in my mailbox. Once, I even found words written in chalk on my driveway, washed away by the rain before I could read them all. And I never answered. Not once. But God forgive me. I read every single one, every comma, every question mark, every tear-stained plea. It wasn't vindication I felt. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something uglier, something I'm not proud to admit. It was fear. Fear that if I opened that door again, if I let her back in, the wound would never heal. That I'd always be waiting for those words to come again. You're dead to me. But that first week when I saw the photo of the boys sleeping on the couch, arms wrapped around each other with the caption, "They miss you," my hand trembled so badly that I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered on the kitchen floor, hot coffee splashing my slippers and the cabinet doors. I didn't clean it up for hours, just sat there, staring at that photo, feeling something worse than guilt crushing my chest. It was love suffocated by hurt. That's when my beautiful cowardice began. See, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, everybody knows everybody. When you've lived on the same street for 68 years, you're not just a neighbor, you're a landmark. So when I walked into Gino's grocery at 5:30 a.m. the next morning, nobody questioned why an old man was buying milk, bread, and eggs he clearly didn't need for himself. "It's for Sarah and the boys," I told Gino, sliding my credit card across the counter. "But she can never know it came from me. Understand?" Gino, who'd known me since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, just nodded, his eyes rimmed red with emotion. He'd heard the story. In small towns, pain travels faster than light. "I'll tell her someone paid it forward," he said quietly. "You're a good man, Walter." Was I, though? A good man would have answered those messages. A good man would have swallowed his pride and walked back through that door. A good man wouldn't have needed to see those little boys with hollow cheeks and too big clothes before deciding to help. Later that day, I saw her Facebook post. Someone paid for our groceries today. God is watching over us somehow. The irony wasn't lost on me. It wasn't God. It was just a broken old man, sitting in his car across the street, watching her load those bags with trembling hands, wondering if she'd noticed that I'd told Gino to add extra cereal, the kind with marshmallows that the boys loved but she never bought because it was too expensive. She didn't notice, but I noticed something worse. How thin she'd become. How her clothes hung off her frame like they belonged to someone else. How she checked her phone obsessively between each bag, probably sending me another message I wouldn't answer. That night, the message came at 11:42 p.m. I don't know how to do this without you. I was wrong, so wrong. Please come back. I typed "I'm here" a dozen times. Deleted it a dozen times. Instead, I made a list. Mortgage payment, electric bill, daycare fees, car insurance. I had the money. Always had. The retirement fund I'd built over 40 years of working at the railroad was more than enough for one old man living alone in a paid-off house. The next morning, I visited the bank, set up anonymous payments, arranged for the daycare to receive a year's worth of tuition from the Children's Education Fund, paid off 2 months of her mortgage as administrative error correction. When I got home, there were 17 new messages waiting. The last one had a photo, her, kneeling by her son's beds, their small hands clasped in prayer. The caption read simply, "Praying for a miracle." If she only knew. The miracle she was praying for was sitting in a recliner 3 miles away, staring at her photo, wondering why the words, "You're dead to me," still had the power to kill him a little more each day. She never knew it was me who paid for the milk at Gino's grocery that Monday morning. The way the sunlight filtered through the dusty windows of that old corner store made everything look like a faded photograph from the 1970s. I'd arrived before dawn, my arthritis flaring up something fierce from the early autumn chill. My bones knew rain was coming even before the weatherman did. "Morning, Walter," Gino's son Anthony said, looking up from where he was stacking canned goods. He had his father's eyes, kind but watchful. "You're here early?" I nodded, my throat tight. Need to take care of something. I knew her schedule by heart now. Sarah would come in around 7:30 after dropping the older boy at school, with little Tommy clutching her hand. She'd count out coins at the register, sometimes coming up short and having to put something back. Usually it was something for herself. "I want to pay for Sarah's groceries today," I told Anthony, sliding my credit card across the counter. "And the daycare bill." I pulled out the envelope with the receipt showing the monthly tuition paid in full. "Make sure she gets this." Anthony didn't ask questions. He just nodded, his eyes red with emotion. "You're a good man, Walter." That was the second time someone had called me good in 2 days. If they only knew how I sat in my car each night, reading her desperate messages, never responding. How would they judge my goodness then? I waited across the street in my old Ford pickup, sipping lukewarm coffee from a thermos. The dashboard clock ticked painfully slowly. At exactly 7:34, her battered blue Honda pulled into the parking lot. I sank lower in my seat. She looked worse than yesterday. Her hair, once her pride and joy, thick auburn waves that my late wife used to say reminded her of autumn leaves, was pulled back in a hasty ponytail. She wore the same sweater as yesterday and the day before. Little Tommy trudged beside her, his shoelaces untied, jacket zipped wrong. I watched them enter the store, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. 10 minutes passed. 15. When they emerged, Sarah was clutching a paper bag to her chest like it contained gold, not groceries. Anthony stood in the doorway, giving me a subtle nod. Her face, God, her face. Confusion, then relief, then a flicker of hope that hurt me more than her anger ever could. She looked around the parking lot, as if expecting to see her benefactor. For a terrifying moment, her gaze passed over my truck, and I ducked down, feeling ridiculous and ancient and broken all at once. Later that afternoon, I saw her Facebook post. "Someone is watching over us. God bless whoever you are." The words were simple, but the photo she attached, of Tommy drinking a glass of milk with a chocolate chip cookie, that was her real thank you. The cookies were a luxury they hadn't had in months. I wasn't prepared for what came next. While scanning through her messages that evening, 47 new ones since morning, I froze at the sight of a particular photo. The boys asleep on the couch, wrapped in a quilt I recognized immediately. One my wife had made for Sarah's wedding. The caption read, "They miss you." Those 3 words shattered something inside me. My hands trembled so violently that I dropped my glass. It splintered across the kitchen floor, water and shards spreading like my own broken resolve. I didn't clean it up, just sat there staring at those sleeping children, remembering how they used to climb into my lap for stories, how they called me Grandpa Walt, even though I was their great uncle. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I began what I now call my shadow charity. Not just groceries or bills, but small, meaningful things. I remembered Tommy needed new shoes. His were worn through at the toes. I recalled that Michael, the older boy, had mentioned wanting a specific book for his birthday before all this happened. The next morning, I was at the shopping center when it opened, bought children's shoes, sizes 4 and 6, a copy of Where the Wild Things Are, with illustrations that would make Michael's eyes light up, school supplies, a gas card for Sarah's car. I arranged everything in a plain brown box, but I wasn't brave enough to deliver it myself. I called in a favor from Father Mike at St. Joseph's, the one person who knew what I was doing and why. He agreed to be my messenger, promising discretion. "She needs more than money, Walter," he said gently as he took the box. "She needs family." "I am helping," I insisted, the words sounding hollow even to me. "Not the way she needs," he replied, his eyes full of a wisdom I wasn't ready to accept. What Father Mike didn't understand was that some wounds go too deep for simple bandages. The day Sarah told me I was dead to her, something did die inside me. Trust, perhaps, or the belief that family means forever. Later that evening, I drove past her house, a habit I couldn't break. The porch light was on. Through the front window, I could see her sitting at the kitchen table, head bowed over what looked like bills. Then something strange happened. She walked to the window and stared out, directly at where my car was parked in the shadows. She couldn't possibly see me, but for a moment it felt like she knew I was there, watching, caring, and still too wounded to come in from the cold. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with her latest message. "I saw the shoes. I saw the book. I know it's you. Please come home." I turned off my phone. Some ghosts aren't ready to rejoin the living, even when they're missed. The first frost of October painted the world silver that morning. I woke before dawn, my joints protesting every movement as I shuffled to the window. My breath fogged the glass while I peered out at the crystallized lawn, remembering how Sarah's boys would beg to make frost angels before the sun melted their canvas. I had a plan today, something small but necessary. As I drove through the quiet streets of Bridgeport, the package sat on my passenger seat, a box of diapers for little Tommy, who at 4 was mostly potty trained but still had accidents at night. Sarah had mentioned it in one of her messages, a passing comment about how expensive pull-ups were becoming, and how she'd started using towels as makeshift protection for his mattress. The parking lot of Milltown Medical Center was nearly empty at 6:15 a.m. Sarah worked as a receptionist there, checking in patients and filing insurance claims from 7 to 3:30. Her Honda was easy to spot, the only car with a faded baby on board sign and a collection of dinosaur stickers decorating the back window. Tommy's passion for prehistoric creatures hadn't faded, even as their world had fallen apart. I approached her car slowly, clutching the package and a small note I'd written in deliberately messy handwriting. They deserved to sleep dry. Nothing that would give away my identity. Nothing that would force her to face me before either of us was ready. My reflection in her car window startled me. When had I gotten so old? My hair, once salt and pepper, now resembled fresh snow. Deep lines had carved permanent paths from my nose to my mouth and from the corners of my eyes toward my temples. This past year had aged me more than the previous 10 combined. With trembling fingers, I placed the package on the driver's seat where she couldn't miss it. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A small, framed photograph clipped to her visor. It was me, holding Tommy on the day he was born. My chest tightened. She'd kept it there even after everything. I retreated to my usual observation post across the street, in the shadow of a massive oak tree that had witnessed far more of Bridgeport's secrets than I ever would. The morning light strengthened, burning away the frost and casting long shadows across the asphalt. At precisely 6:47 a.m., I saw her approaching. Sarah looked different today. Her shoulders weren't as slumped, and she'd pulled her hair into a neat bun instead of the hasty ponytail I'd grown accustomed to seeing. She wore a touch of lipstick, something I hadn't seen in months. Small signs of a woman trying to pull herself back together, one fragment at a time. When she reached her car and spotted the package, she froze. Her head snapped up, eyes scanning the parking lot like a startled deer searching for predators or saviors. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought she might see me. I pressed myself against the rough bark of the oak, feeling ridiculous. A 68-year-old man hiding like a schoolboy. She picked up the package, read the note, and then, a miracle. She smiled. It was brief, fragile, like a butterfly landing for just a moment before taking flight again. But it was real. The first genuine smile I'd seen on her face since that Thanksgiving day when she'd banished me from her life. But then something strange happened. She pulled out her phone, stared at it, and the color drained from her face. Her hands began to shake so badly that she dropped the package of diapers. She didn't bend to retrieve it. Instead, she fumbled with her keys, practically threw herself into the driver's seat, and sat there for several minutes, head bowed, shoulders heaving in what I recognized even from a distance as silent sobs. What had happened? What message had stolen her brief moment of joy? My first instinct was to rush over to comfort her as I once would have without hesitation. But the memory of, "You're dead to me," anchored me to my hiding spot, a ghost unable to cross over into the world of the living. Later that day, I received the answer. Her message came at 12:34 p.m. during her lunch break. "Someone's leaving things for us. Diapers today. I thought it was you at first, but then Linda called. She says Megan is telling everyone you stole money from the family trust, that you've been hiding it all these years. Is that why you won't answer me? Is that why you disappeared when we needed you most?" Megan, my niece, Robert's sister. The name made my blood run cold. There had always been tension between us. Subtle barbs at family gatherings, sidelong glances that carried weight. But I never imagined she'd fabricate such a vicious lie. The family trust had been dissolved years ago, the money distributed equally among my brother's children. I'd been the executor, nothing more. Why would Megan create such a story? What could she possibly gain from driving this wedge deeper between Sarah and me? The answer came 3 days later, when my banker called. "Mr. Peterson, I'm calling about some unusual activity on your joint account," Mrs. Dawson said, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone delivering potentially troubling news. "Joint account?" I repeated, confused. "I don't have any joint accounts anymore." "The one you shared with your late brother," she clarified. "It shows access attempts from someone using the security questions, but failing the two-factor authentication." The realization hit me like a physical blow. That account, dormant for years, holding only a nominal amount for tax purposes, was known to only a handful of people. My brother, now gone, myself, and Megan, who had helped with her father's finances in his final days. "Has anyone successfully accessed it?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "No, sir. Our security protocols prevented it, but they've tried 3 times in the past week." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the yellowing linoleum floor, putting pieces together. Megan hadn't just been spreading lies. She'd been attempting to access forgotten family funds, and when her attempts failed, she'd created a narrative that painted me as the villain, ensuring that if I ever tried to defend myself, I'd appear guilty by default. The perfect crime, discredit the only person who knew the truth, and Sarah, caught in the middle, believing her sister-in-law over the uncle who had loved her like a daughter for 20 years. That night I drove past Sarah's house again. The lights were on, but the curtains drawn. I couldn't see inside, couldn't know if she was still reading Megan's poisonous messages, still believing I had betrayed the family. My phone buzzed with a new message from Sarah. "If you ever cared about us at all, tell me the truth, please." The truth. Such a simple request, and yet so impossibly complicated. Because the truth wasn't just about bank accounts and family trusts. The truth was about broken hearts and wounded pride and the terrible power of words that can't be unsaid. I typed 3 words. "I'm innocent, Sarah," then deleted them. Some truths need to be delivered face-to-face, not through the cold medium of text messages. Instead, I drove home in silence, formulating a different plan. If I couldn't defend myself with words, I would do it with actions. She only hated me because she was manipulated. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer as I sat in my living room that evening. surrounded by old photographs and even older memories. The amber glow of my reading lamp cast long shadows across the worn carpet as I sifted through decades of family history captured in fading Polaroids and carefully preserved portraits. My hands trembled as I picked up a particular photo, Sarah's wedding day 5 years ago. There she stood, radiant in white, sandwiched between myself and Robert. My nephew had his arm around her waist, beaming with pride. I stood on her other side, my eyes crinkling with joy beneath bushy eyebrows that had only recently begun their transition to white. And there, lurking at the edge of the frame, was Megan, Robert's sister, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I should have seen it then, the resentment, the calculation. But I was too busy being happy for the young couple, too preoccupied with my role as surrogate father to the bride whose own parents had died in that terrible accident when she was just 19. Setting the photo down, I picked up my phone and scrolled through Sarah's messages. 6 months of desperate pleas, accusations, and finally, confusion. I'd read them all, felt each word like a physical pain, but never responded. Not once. My pride, that damnable Peterson pride my late wife always warned me about, had kept me silent. Now I saw the pattern. The first messages were raw with hurt, still echoing her last words to me. "You're dead to me." But as weeks passed, confusion crept in. Questions about money, references to things Megan had told her, accusations that grew more specific, more pointed. Megan showed me the trust documents. "How could you hide that money from us when we're about to lose everything?" She said you've been skimming from the family fund for years, that you have a secret account in the Caymans. Is that true? Megan says you never approved of me, that you told Robert I was just after the Peterson money. Did you really say that? Each accusation more absurd than the last. There was no secret account, no skimming. And God knows I loved Sarah like my own daughter from the moment Robert brought her home. This shy, determined girl with fierce intelligence and a laugh that could light up a room. The truth unfolded before me like a poisonous flower. Megan had orchestrated everything. She'd fed Sarah carefully crafted lies, playing on her vulnerabilities after Robert abandoned her. And Sarah, drowning in grief and betrayal, had been all too ready to believe the worst about the man she'd once called Dad, when her own father couldn't be there to walk her down the aisle. I was so lost in these realizations that I almost missed the sharp knock at my door. Glancing at the clock, 9:47 p.m., I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone, and in my neighborhood, unexpected visitors after dark were rare enough to cause concern. When I opened the door, the cold November air rushed in, along with the tall, grim figure of Detective James Morales. I'd known Jim since he was a rookie officer. His father and I had worked together at the railroad for 30 years. "Evening, Walter," he said, removing his hat. "Mind if I come in? Got something we need to discuss." My kitchen felt smaller with Jim's bulk occupying one of the chairs. Steam rose from the coffee cups between us, fogging his glasses slightly as he leaned forward. "I'm not here officially," he began, his voice low despite us being alone. "But something crossed my desk today that didn't sit right. Fraud complaint. Your name was on it." My stomach clenched. "Fraud?" He nodded, eyes solemn. "Filed by Megan Peterson. Claims you embezzled from a family trust. Says she has documents to prove it." He paused, studying me. "Thing is, I've known you 40 years, Walt. You're the most honest man in Bridgeport, so I did some digging." Jim slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, and account registrations dating back 15 years. "Megan's been systematically draining her inheritance," he explained. "Gambling debts mostly. Atlantic City. When she ran out of her money, she started looking for more. That's where you come in." "The joint account with my brother," I whispered. "Exactly. But when she couldn't access it because of the security measures, she needed a scapegoat and a distraction." He tapped the folder. "She's been telling Sarah that you stole the money that should have gone to Robert, and by extension, to her and the boys after he left." "But that's ridiculous," I protested. "Robert received his full share years ago. We all did." "I know that, but Sarah doesn't. And Megan's been feeding her just enough truth mixed with lies to make it all believable, especially to someone desperate for answers about why her life fell apart." I slumped back in my chair, feeling every one of my 68 years in the ache of my bones. "Why are you telling me this, Jim? Why not just arrest Megan?" His expression softened. "Because the fraud complaint against you is bogus, but the evidence against Megan isn't strong enough yet for charges and..." He hesitated. Because Sarah came to the station yesterday, asked us to investigate why a mysterious benefactor has been helping her. She's scared, Walt. Thinks it might be connected to Robert's disappearance. My heart sank. My attempts to help anonymously had only fueled her paranoia. I didn't tell her it was you, Jim continued. That's not my place. But she needs someone, Walt. Those boys need someone. After Jim left, I sat alone in my silent house, turning his words over in my mind. Sarah believed I'd betrayed the family, believed I'd stolen money that should have helped her and the boys, and now she feared that my anonymous assistance was something sinister, all because of Megan's lies. I picked up my phone, stared at Sarah's last message from earlier that day. If you ever loved us at all, please tell me the truth. The truth. Such a simple word for such a complicated thing. My fingers hovered over the keypad. For the first time in 6 months, I began to type a response. Not excuses, not accusations. Just 3 simple words that would either begin to heal this broken family or shatter it beyond repair. I'm coming over. Then I deleted it. Because some truths can't be told in words. Some truths must be demonstrated through actions, through presence, through the courage to face hurt with love. Instead, I grabbed my coat and car keys. It was time to stop hiding in shadows. Time to bring Megan's deception into the light. Time to be the father figure these children needed. Not the ghost I'd allowed myself to become. The last week of December brought the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes a home there. I woke that morning to find my windows frosted over, delicate ice crystals creating nature's own stained glass. My phone chirped from the nightstand, a message notification that made my heart skip a beat. It was 5:37 a.m., an unusual hour for anyone to text unless something was wrong. I fumbled for my reading glasses, squinting at the bright screen in my dark bedroom. The car won't start. They both have fevers. Please help us. My throat tightened as I read Sarah's words. In the 6 months since she'd banished me from her life, this was the first message that contained no accusations, no questions about money or betrayal, just raw desperation from a mother at the end of her rope. I was dressed and grabbing my car keys before I'd even made a conscious decision. Outside, the world was transformed into a winter nightmare. 8 inches of fresh snow had fallen overnight, with more still coming down in heavy wet flakes. The temperature gauge on my dashboard read 7 degrees, and the roads were slick with black ice beneath the powder. The drive to Sarah's house normally took 12 minutes. That morning it took 28 agonizing ones. My knuckles white on the steering wheel as my old Ford pickup crawled through treacherous conditions. What would I say to her? What could I say after months of silence? The questions tumbled through my mind like the snowflakes swirling in my headlights. I was still a quarter mile away when I saw the flashing lights, red and blue pulses cutting through the pre-dawn darkness, reflected and amplified by the snow. An ambulance and 2 police cruisers were parked haphazardly in front of Sarah's modest colonial, their emergency lights painting the white landscape in alternating crimson and sapphire. My heart plummeted. I pulled over, suddenly unable to breathe. Through my frosted windshield, I could make out a stretcher being guided down the front steps, a small figure strapped to it. One of the boys. Which one? I couldn't tell from this distance. A paramedic held an oxygen mask over the child's face while another pushed an IV stand alongside. Then I saw Sarah. She followed the stretcher in what looked like a bathrobe and boots, her hair wild, face contorted with fear. Even from a distance, I could see she was shivering violently in the bitter cold. No coat, no gloves, just pure maternal instinct driving her forward as she clutched what had to be her other son to her chest, wrapped in what looked like a bedspread. The second boy, Tommy, I thought, recognizing the dinosaur pajamas beneath the blanket, was also clearly ill. His small face was flushed with fever, visible even in the weird, pulsing light of the emergency vehicles. I should have driven up, should have announced my presence, offered help, been the man I'd always promised to be for this family. Instead, I sat frozen in my truck, watching the ambulance doors close, watching Sarah climb in clutching Tommy, watching the vehicle pull away with its precious cargo, sirens wailing into the snowy darkness. Shame burned hotter than any fever as I finally forced myself to drive past the house. I noticed things my decades of maintenance work made impossible to ignore. The porch steps were dangerously icy, with no salt spread to provide traction. The windows were covered in frost on the inside, a clear sign the heating system had failed. And Sarah's Honda sat in the driveway, hood up, abandoned mid-repair. I didn't follow the ambulance. Couldn't bear to see the look on Sarah's face if she spotted me after months of my silence. Instead, I drove to Bridgeport General Hospital and parked in the far corner of the visitor's lot, watching the emergency entrance from a distance as they wheeled in first Michael, then Tommy on separate stretchers, Sarah running alongside, still in her bathrobe. My phone buzzed again at 7:21 a.m. They both have pneumonia. Doctor says Tommy's is bacterial. Michael's is viral. They need to stay. I don't have insurance anymore. I don't know what to do. I didn't respond. But I did something better. Within the hour, I'd contacted the hospital's billing department. A lifetime of careful saving and investing had left me with more money than a childless widower could ever need. I'd like to cover all expenses for the Peterson children, I told the administrator. Anonymously. The woman, Judith, according to her nameplate, raised an eyebrow. That's very generous, Mr. Peterson. Walter Peterson. I slid my credit card across the desk. I'm their great-uncle. Recognition dawned in her eyes. Sarah's uncle? She's mentioned you. My heart clenched. Has she? Judith nodded, her expression softening. She said you were the only real father she ever had. Present tense, not past. The realization nearly brought me to my knees. Please don't tell her I was here, I said quietly. There's been a misunderstanding between us. After leaving the hospital, I drove to Sarah's house, parked down the street, and walked through knee-deep snow to examine the Honda. The battery was dead, that much was obvious. But there was something else wrong. Something that made my blood run cold despite the bitter temperature. The spark plug wires had been deliberately cut. Someone had sabotaged her car. I photographed the damage with trembling hands, then set about making temporary repairs. Enough to get the car started at least. As I worked, I noticed something else. The gas cap was ajar, and when I checked, the tank was bone dry despite being half full when I'd seen her fill it just 2 days ago. Someone had siphoned her gas and cut her ignition wires on the coldest night of the year, knowing she had 2 small children in a house with a failing heating system. This wasn't simple cruelty. This was calculated, potentially deadly malice. After fixing the car, I broke into the house. If jimmying open the back door with skills learned from 40 years of maintenance work could be called breaking in. Inside, the temperature was barely above freezing. The thermostat read 37 degrees, and the furnace, when I checked it in the basement, had been switched off at the main electrical panel. This wasn't a coincidence or a mechanical failure. This was deliberate. I restarted the furnace, then went upstairs to the boys' room. Their beds were unmade, fever-dampened sheets tangled and discarded. Dinosaur toys and action figures were scattered across the carpet, abandoned in play. On Michael's nightstand sat a framed photo, the 4 of us at Coney Island last summer, before everything fell apart, before "You're dead to me," before Robert's abandonment and Megan's manipulations. I picked up the photo, something hot and wet tracking down my weathered cheeks. Then I noticed Michael's toy box was open, a familiar blue fabric visible among the jumble of childhood treasures. I reached in and pulled out the old cardigan Sarah had given me for Christmas 3 years ago. The boys had kept it, hidden it away like a talisman. That evening, I returned to the hospital. Not to see Sarah, I still wasn't ready, and neither was she. But I left a carefully folded package at the nurse's station, a heavy winter coat I'd purchased on my way over, along with 2 sets of children's pajamas, toiletries, and a prepaid debit card with enough money to cover meals and incidentals for the coming days. And as I walked back to my truck through the swirling snow, my phone lit up with another message from Sarah. They're stable. Someone paid all the hospital bills. Someone brought clothes and money. Was it you? Are you finally ready to talk to me? Please, I need to know why you left us when we needed you most. I stared at the message for a long time, standing alone in the silent parking lot as snowflakes gathered on my shoulders. Then I turned off my phone and drove home, plans already forming in my mind. Because whoever had sabotaged Sarah's car and heating system wasn't just trying to hurt her. They were trying to hurt those boys. My boys, in every way that mattered. And that was something I would never allow. Not even if Sarah still believed I was dead to her. It was a video that changed everything. 3 days after the boys were released from the hospital, I was back to my silent vigil, helping from the shadows, watching from a distance, my heart still too bruised for a proper reunion. January had brought slightly milder temperatures but heavier snow, transforming Connecticut into a landscape of pristine white drifts and treacherous ice patches. That Thursday afternoon, I followed Sarah to Millerson's grocery on 3rd Street. Not in a creepy way, I told myself, but in the protective manner of a guardian angel who couldn't quite bring himself to reveal his wings. She'd gone back to work at the medical center, leaving the boys with a neighbor while she shopped during her lunch break. I watched her push a cart through the slush of the parking lot, her shoulders hunched against the biting wind, her red wool hat pulled low over her ears. The forecast had promised clear skies, but Connecticut winters are fickle beasts. Dark clouds gathered suddenly, and fat snowflakes began to fall, just as Sarah emerged from the store with her cart piled high with groceries. The snow quickly intensified into a proper squall, coating her hair and shoulders in seconds. She struggled to navigate the cart through the rapidly accumulating snow, trying simultaneously to shield her bags from the wetness. I couldn't help myself. Before conscious thought could intervene, I was out of my truck, shuffling as fast as my arthritic knees would allow toward her through the swirling white. She had her back to me, wrestling with a package of paper towels that threatened to fly away in the gusty wind. I reached her cart, just as she turned to retrieve a fallen can of soup. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought she might recognize me despite my pulled-down cap and upturned collar, but she was too distracted by the weather and her scattered groceries to notice the old man who silently began covering her paper bags with plastic ones from the dispenser at the end of the checkout lane. "Oh, thank you," she said absently, not really looking at me, just grateful for the unexpected help. Her voice, that familiar melody I'd missed for so many months, made my chest ache. I didn't speak, couldn't speak, just nodded and continued methodically wrapping her groceries in protective plastic, my weathered hands working quickly despite the cold that made my joints protest. When I finished, I gave the cart a gentle push toward her car, then turned and walked away before she could get a proper look at my face. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the entire interaction had been captured by Millerson's security camera mounted above the entrance. The black and white footage showed a stooped elderly man coming to the aid of a young mother caught in a sudden snowstorm. The camera didn't catch my face clearly, but it recorded my distinctive gait, the slight limp from my old railroad injury, the way I favored my right side when the weather turned cold. That evening, Sarah posted the video on the community Facebook page. Beneath it, she wrote, "To the kind stranger who helped me in the snowstorm today at Millerson's, thank you. In a world where kindness sometimes seems in short supply, you reminded me that angels still walk among us. If you see this, please know you made a difference." Angels. The word pierced me. I was no angel, just a stubborn old man too proud to pick up the phone, too wounded to knock on a door, too afraid of hearing, "You're dead" to me, a second time. I stared at that post for hours, reading and rereading the comments from neighbors speculating about the Good Samaritan's identity. Some suggested it might be Pastor Miller from First Baptist. Others thought it looked like old Mr. Gunderson who lived by the park. No one guessed it was Walter Peterson, the reclusive widower who hadn't been seen at community functions since that explosive Thanksgiving dinner. But Sarah knew. Somehow, she knew. The next morning, her message was different from all the hundreds that had come before. No pleas for forgiveness. No questions about money. No desperate appeals for help. Just 4 simple words that stopped my heart. "It was you, wasn't it?" I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside me, staring at those words as the winter sun crept across the linoleum floor. My finger hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. After 7 months of silence, would I finally respond? Before I could decide, another message appeared. "The way you walked. The way you fixed the plastic bags just so. The green gloves I gave you 3 Christmases ago. I'd know you anywhere, Walter." My vision blurred. She'd recognized me not by my face but by my hands, by the careful, methodical way I'd always fixed things, by the gloves I couldn't bear to replace even though the right thumb was wearing thin. And then, the final message that morning, "If you won't talk to me, I'll come to you." Panic surged through me. I wasn't ready. The house was a mess. I hadn't shaved in days. There were too many things unsaid, too many wounds still raw. I typed frantically, "Not yet, please." But I couldn't send it. 7 months of silence, and these were the first words I would offer? No. If this reckoning was coming, I would face it with dignity. I spent the day in a frenzy of nervous preparation. Vacuumed the living room, washed dishes that had piled up, put fresh sheets on the guest bed in case. But no, that was getting ahead of myself. She might come to yell, to demand explanations, to confirm her suspicions about the anonymous help, not to reconcile. At exactly 6:15 p.m., headlights swept across my front window. A car door slammed. Footsteps crunched through the snow up my walkway, but no knock came. I waited, holding my breath for what felt like eternity. Finally, unable to bear the suspense, I crept to the window and peered through a crack in the curtains. Sarah stood on my porch, illuminated by the yellow porch light, snowflakes swirling around her like tiny stars. She didn't knock, didn't ring the bell, just stood there, staring at the door, her expression a complex tapestry of emotions I couldn't fully decipher from my hiding place. Anger, longing, relief, fear, all of these and more played across her features as she stood motionless in the gathering darkness. For 40 minutes, she remained there, as if held in place by some invisible force. I watched, equally frozen from behind my curtain, neither of us brave enough to bridge the final gap, both of us prisoners of pride and pain and words that couldn't be unsaid. Finally, she knelt and placed something on the welcome mat, a folded piece of paper. Then she turned and walked back to her car, shoulders squared with a determination I recognized all too well. The same determination that had gotten her through nursing school while working 2 jobs. The same determination that had helped her raise 2 boys essentially alone even before Robert officially abandoned them. After her taillights disappeared down the street, I opened my front door with trembling hands and retrieved the note. 4 simple words that would change everything. I know. Please forgive. I clutched the paper to my chest, tears flowing freely now. No signature needed. No explanation required. Just acknowledgement and the beginning of healing. That night, for the first time in 7 months, I slept without dreams of that Thanksgiving dinner, without hearing, "You're dead to me," echoing through my subconscious. Instead, I dreamed of spring, of renewal, of family dinners, yet to come. The next morning, I awoke to a new message. "The boys ask about you every day. They still call you Grandpa Walt. They never stopped." I read those words as the winter sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, creating patterns on the faded quilt my late wife had made decades ago. Outside, a cardinal, bright red against the snow, perched on my windowsill, as if delivering nature's own message of hope. It was time. Time to end the silence. Time to step out of the shadows. Time to be the grandfather those boys needed. Not just an anonymous benefactor, but a present, loving force in their lives. With steady hands, I finally typed my response. "I never stopped loving any of you. Not for a single moment." She didn't come to my birthday celebration. April 17th came and went with a silence that felt both familiar and strange. After our text exchange in January, I'd expected, something. A card, perhaps. A phone call. Maybe even a visit with the boys. But nothing came except a single text message at 7:14 a.m. "Happy birthday, Walter." Not even signed. Just those 3 words floating in the digital ether between us. I told myself it didn't matter. That 7 months of stubborn silence couldn't be erased by a few text messages and a note left on a doorstep. That trust, once shattered, required more than good intentions to rebuild. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Sitting alone at my kitchen table with a single candle stuck in a store-bought cupcake, singing "Happy Birthday" in a whisper to myself as evening shadows lengthened across the worn linoleum floor. She didn't come to my grandson's baptism either. Little Jamie, my niece Patricia's first child, was welcomed into the church on the first Sunday in May. The whole extended Peterson clan gathered at First Presbyterian, the same church where I'd married my Martha 43 years earlier, where we'd baptized our son who didn't live to see his first birthday, where I'd said my final goodbye to Martha after cancer took her. I kept glancing at the door throughout the service, hoping to see Sarah slip in quietly with Michael and Tommy in tow. I'd even saved them seats, 4th pew from the front, gospel side, Martha's favorite spot. But the seats remained empty, conspicuous in their vacancy among the otherwise packed pews. Patricia noticed. After the service, as we gathered in the church basement for punch and cake, she squeezed my arm gently. "You were looking for her, weren't you?" she asked, her voice low enough that the surrounding relatives couldn't hear. I didn't pretend not to understand. Thought she might come, for Jamie's sake. Patricia's eyes, so like her father's, my brother Harold, softened with sympathy. "She's still hurting, Uncle Walt. We all are after what Robert did. And Megan," she trailed off, unwilling to speak ill of her cousin despite everything. "I know. I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Some wounds take longer to heal, but even as I said it, a voice in the back of my mind whispered, or maybe they never heal at all. June brought a heat wave and with it, unexpected tragedy. Harold, my younger brother by just 14 months, my best friend since childhood, my last remaining sibling, collapsed while mowing his lawn on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. Massive heart attack, the doctor said. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. The funeral was set for Friday. As the oldest surviving Peterson, it fell to me to make arrangements, to greet mourners, to stand strong while the family crumbled around me. I did it all mechanically, moving through the motions like a marionette controlled by habit and duty rather than genuine will. The funeral home was stifling despite the air conditioning laboring against the summer heat. Dark suits and black dresses, hushed voices and muted sobs. The cloying scent of too many flower arrangements crammed into too small a space. It all blended into a surreal tableau of grief. I stood at the entrance to the viewing room, shaking hands, accepting hugs, murmuring the same platitudes over and over until the words lost all meaning. Thank you for coming. Harold would be touched. Yes, it was very sudden. No suffering, thank God for small mercies. I didn't see her enter, didn't notice her presence until I turned to accept a sympathy card from a former railroad colleague and caught a glimpse of auburn hair in the back row. My heart stuttered. Sarah sat alone, her face pale and drawn, eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She wore a simple black dress I'd never seen before and, I noticed with a pang that felt like physical pain, the cashmere scarf I'd given her 2 Christmases ago, the one with tiny snowflakes embroidered along the edges, the one Martha had started before cancer claimed her, and that I'd painstakingly finished in the long, lonely evenings after her death. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a moment, everything else faded away. The murmuring mourners, the stifling heat, even Harold's body lying in state at the front of the room. There was only Sarah and me, locked in a gaze that contained a novel's worth of unspoken words. She didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't make any gesture of acknowledgement beyond that steady, penetrating look. But she was here. After 9 months of absence, after "you're dead to me," after hundreds of unanswered messages, she had come to stand with family in grief. Throughout the service, I was acutely aware of her presence like a physical weight against my skin. During the eulogy, I found myself speaking not just to the assembled mourners but to her specifically, hoping she could hear the subtext beneath my words about Harold's capacity for forgiveness, his belief that family transcended disagreement, his insistence that love was the only legacy that mattered in the end. At the cemetery, she stood apart from the family group, half hidden behind an ancient oak tree. As they lowered Harold's casket into the ground, I watched a tear track silently down her cheek, catching the afternoon sunlight like a diamond before she brushed it away with a quick, almost angry gesture. Afterward, the family gathered at Patricia's house for the traditional post-funeral meal. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, accepting condolences, reminiscing about Harold when required, but always aware of the absence that felt more significant than any presence. Sarah hadn't come to the reception. I told myself it was for the best, that we weren't ready for the public reunion, the explanations, the curious stares from relatives too long marinated in family gossip and speculation. But as the afternoon waned and guests began to depart, I found myself sitting alone on Patricia's back porch, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee and staring at the message I'd typed but not yet sent. Thank you for coming today. It meant more than you know. A shadow fell across me. I looked up, expecting Patricia, or perhaps one of Harold's grandchildren. Instead, I found Sarah standing at the top of the porch steps, her knuckles white where she gripped the railing. She'd changed from the funeral dress into jeans and a simple blouse, but still wore the snowflake scarf despite the summer heat. I should have come sooner, she said, her voice barely audible above the distant sounds of conversation drifting from inside the house. I gripped my cane tighter, suddenly needing its support even though I was seated. Every word I'd rehearsed in my mind over 9 months of separation evaporated like morning dew under the direct heat of her presence. She took a step closer. Dad. The word emerged as a whisper, a question, a plea. That single word, the one she'd called me since I walked her down the aisle at her wedding, the one that had always made my chest swell with a pride and love that transcended biological connection, hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, Could only stare at this woman who had been my daughter in every way that mattered, who had declared me dead to her, who had broken my heart and then broken it again with her absence, who now stood before me with her own heart visibly shattered in her trembling hands. I took a step backward, not in rejection, never that, but in self-preservation. Because forgiveness, I was discovering, was not a single act but a process, a journey with steps both forward and back, a path that couldn't be rushed without risking further damage to us both. "I can't," I said finally, the words scraping my throat raw. "Not today, not yet." Something flickered in her eyes. Disappointment, understanding, resignation. She nodded once, a short, sharp movement, then turned to go. "Sarah," I called after her, my voice stronger now. She paused but didn't turn. "I'm glad you came today." Harold would have been too. She stood motionless for a heartbeat. 2, 3. Then she walked away, her shoulders set in that familiar, determined line, leaving me alone with my cooling coffee and the weight of words still unsaid. Because sometimes forgiveness needs silence before it can find its voice. Sometimes healing requires distance before wounds can be redressed. And sometimes, even the strongest love must wait for the right moment to rebuild what hurt has destroyed. She still sends me messages every day, not the desperate flood of 500 daily pleas that characterized those first 6 months after she told me I was dead to her. Now it's just one message every morning like clockwork. 7:15 a.m., just as the Connecticut sun begins to illuminate my bedroom window, and the cardinals start their morning songs in the old maple tree outside. "Good morning, Dad. I'm trying again today." 2 years have passed since Harold's funeral. 2 years of healing, of cautious steps toward reconciliation, of rebuilding what was broken that Thanksgiving day when words shattered more than just silence. 2 years of her daily messages, persistent, patient, like water slowly smoothing rough stone. I read every single one, but I can't respond anymore. Not since the stroke took my speech 3 months ago. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday in March. I was in my workshop behind the house restoring an antique rocking horse for Tommy's 6th birthday. My hands were steady as they'd always been, even at 70, carefully sanding the worn wooden mane to prepare it for fresh paint. The radio played softly in the background. Frank Sinatra, Martha's favorite. Outside, the last stubborn patches of winter snow were finally surrendering to spring's insistence. I remember feeling a strange heaviness in my left arm, then a curious numbness spreading across my face like cold honey. I remember thinking with odd detachment, so this is how it happens. Then darkness. I woke in Bridgeport General, surrounded by beeping machines and the antiseptic smell that's the same in every hospital across America. A young doctor with kind eyes and a wedding ring that looked too new on his finger explained what had happened. Ischemic stroke. Left hemisphere. Moderate damage to the speech center. Words were formed perfectly in my mind but refused to travel to my mouth. My right side was weakened but not paralyzed. With therapy, I might walk again without assistance. But my voice, the voice that had read bedtime stories to Sarah's boys, that had given eulogies for both my wife and my brother, that had once told terrible jokes just to hear Sarah's explosive laugh, that voice was silent, perhaps forever. Sarah was my emergency contact, had been since Martha died. Despite everything, I'd never changed it. She arrived at the hospital before I'd even regained consciousness, the nurse told me later. Stayed through the night, holding my hand, talking to me even though I couldn't respond. By the time I opened my eyes, she'd already arranged for the best neurologist in Connecticut to consult on my case, had interviewed 3 rehabilitation facilities, and had cleared out the downstairs study in her home to create a bedroom for me. I refused, of course. Stubbornly insisted on returning to my own home, communicating through a frustrating combination of handwritten notes and rudimentary hand gestures. The doctors advised against it. Sarah pleaded, but some habits are hard to break, and Peterson pride doesn't die easily, even after a stroke. So we compromised. I moved into Bridgeview Rehabilitation Center, 5 minutes from Sarah's house. Close enough for daily visits, but maintaining the independence I wasn't ready to surrender. That was 3 months ago. Now each morning at precisely 9:30 a.m., Sarah arrives at Bridgeview with a thermos of coffee brewed exactly how I like it, strong enough to stand a spoon in, with just a whisper of cream. She brings the crossword puzzle from the Bridgeport Gazette, which we work on together, her reading the clues aloud, me pointing to letters on a laminated alphabet board when my handwriting becomes too shaky for pen and paper. She never mentions the past, never refers to those terrible months of separation, never asks why I didn't answer her messages for so long. Instead, she talks about Michael's baseball games, Tommy's dinosaur obsession, the vegetable garden she's planted in the backyard of the house I helped her buy when she and Robert first married. Sometimes she brings the boys, now 8 and 6, their energy transforming my sterile room into a whirlwind of laughter and movement. They climb onto my bed without hesitation, showing me artwork from school, demonstrating karate moves learned in after-school classes, arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it is to help Grandpa Walt with his physical therapy exercises. They show no awareness of the rift that once existed, no memory of the months when their grandfather was just a ghost helping from the shadows. Children are resilient that way, their capacity for unconditional love unmarred by adult complexities, their forgiveness immediate and complete without the need for explanations or apologies. Yesterday, Michael, serious, thoughtful Michael, who resembles his absent father in looks but thankfully not in character, asked me a question that pierced straight through to my heart. "Grandpa, why do you never answer Mom's messages?" I froze, my hand hovering over the alphabet board. Sarah, arranging flowers by the window, went very still, her back to us, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. How to explain to an 8-year-old the complicated dance of hurt and pride and fear that had kept me silent for so long? How to convey that sometimes words fail us not because we have nothing to say, but because we have too much? Before I could attempt an answer, Tommy bounced on the bed, oblivious to the weight of the moment. "It's 'cause Grandpa's voice is sleeping," he announced with the simple wisdom of childhood. "But his heart still talks to us. Right, Grandpa?" I nodded, tears blurring my vision, and pulled both boys close with my good arm. Later, after they'd left, Michael with a solemn handshake, Tommy with a kiss that landed somewhere between my ear and cheek. I sat alone in the gathering twilight, watching shadows lengthen across the institutional beige carpet. My phone sat on the bedside table, screen dark and silent until morning would bring Sarah's daily message. Using my clumsy right hand, I picked it up and slowly, laboriously typed out the response I should have sent 2 years ago. "I never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment. Not even when the words hurt too much to bear. Not even in my silence. Especially not then." My finger hovered over the send button, trembling not from the neurological damage but from the magnitude of what this message represented. An end to silence. A bridge across the chasm. A return from the death she had pronounced upon me that Thanksgiving Day. But I didn't press send, not because I didn't mean every word with every fiber of my being, but because some things need to be said face to face, need to be spoken with more than just thumbs on a digital keyboard. Even if those words must come through an alphabet board pointed to by a shaking finger, they deserve the dignity of presence. Tomorrow morning, her message will come as it always does. "Good morning, Dad. I'm trying again today. And perhaps tomorrow, instead of just reading it in silence, I'll find the courage to show her my response. To finally complete the circle that began with, 'You're dead to me,' and continues with her faithful daily attempts to resurrect what was lost. Because if I've learned anything from these 2 years of messages, from 500 daily pleas reduced to one faithful morning greeting, it's that forgiveness isn't an event. It's a road. Long, painful, full of stones, and sometimes we can only walk it on our knees. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those we love most. When someone declares you dead to them, it creates a chasm that feels impossible to cross. But as Walter's story shows us, love can persist even in silence, even when pride and pain build walls between hearts that once beat as one. What would you have done in Walter's position? Would you have answered those 500 daily messages? Or would you have chosen, as he did, to help from the shadows while protecting your wounded heart? We all face moments where forgiveness seems impossible, where reconciliation feels beyond reach. Yet the path back to each other is rarely found through grand gestures. It's discovered in small acts of kindness, in persistent attempts to reconnect, in the courage to try again each morning despite previous rejection. Walter and Sarah's journey reminds us that sometimes the road to healing must be walked on our knees in humility and with patience. Their story isn't just about family betrayal. It's about the extraordinary resilience of human connection that refuses to die even when declared dead. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel for more powerful tales of redemption, forgiveness, and the complicated beauty of family relationships. Like and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to rebuild what's broken, whether you're the one who needs to forgive or the one seeking forgiveness. Remember, every sunrise offers a new chance to say, "I'm trying again today."